Manning job to try to write it. It's stupid, in fact. But that's what I did. Well, I will look forward to your comments in a little while, but I hope you get well.
I don't know how meaningful my comments will be, but I try my best as a sort of a traditional historian.
Yeah, well,
I'm more eager to learn how we can be part of this history of the planet, rather than
it's easy.
Making any.
Just get old enough. When you get older, you don't care what your colleagues think so much.
No, but you look truly great. I listened to your first lecture, so I really enjoyed it very much. So
I can do one, but not 3 in a week, and 3 next week, and 3 the next week, or whatever. But anyway, it's good to have you here. So I have to save my voice a little. Are we ready to go?
How long will you be in China?
Till December 7.
Oh.
1 month.
Oh, I see. Oh, so I think we still have a chance to see each other. Oh, that's good. So will you be in Beijing, or will you give a book tour elsewhere?
Elsewhere. I'm going to Shenzhen, Wuhan, Qingdao, and then back to Beijing, and then home.
Oh, okay.
So.
All right. Okay.
Okay, let me see if I can drink some tea. It's so hot. Would you give me my bottle of water? Out here too, just in case I eat something more. 下午好. I can say it today. It is afternoon. It's good to see you all. It's a much smaller audience, so we're not so crowded. But since I talked on Monday, my voice has become really bad. So I will try not to. Oh, he's going to introduce me.
Yeah, I put it over here. Okay.
I'm sorry I jumped in. Somebody told me it was time to start.
I prepared it in the page.
Oh, okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased and honored to be here with a towering figure in the history, in the environment history, Professor Donald Worcester. And given the rapid development of environmental history in China and the engaged contribution of Don to the rapid development of environmental history in China. And I think there's no need for me to give a detailed introduction of the professor himself. Today's topic, the great transformation and the dream of infinite growth, embodies Professor Worcester's highly reflective and holistic perspective views from his recent research on the planetary history. From my recent reading of this book, which was recently published in Chinese, I'm confident that his insight will be very much intellectual, stimulating and inspiring. Following the lecture, we will hear Professor Lu Yang's remark, who is a distinguished historian and also a philologist, and a former colleague of Don's. Having Professor Lu as a commentator, as arranged by Ho Shen, is a kind of unusual and unconventional. considering Professor Lu's profound, consider the perceived distance between their specialized fields. However, since Professor Lu has a profound erudition, we can expect especially cross-border, intriguing and illuminating remarks from here. I would also like to introduce Professor Mao Lian from the Department of English language and history, who is an expert on American literature, especially on transcendentalists. He's also a translator of Henry James. He admires your literary power and has long been looking forward to meeting you, and it's a great encounter. After Professor Lu's comments, we'll have Q&A session. You can speak short since you saw due to a sore throat.
Oh, she drives me. She's mean to me. No, I can't stop short. I have to go longer.
And the audience will have opportunities to ask questions. Now, it's your turn, Don.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, dear friend and colleague. As I just started to say, the first night destroyed my throat. This afternoon may destroy it again, but I hope you will come back on Friday, because I have the most new stuff I have to talk about is probably going to be on Friday. We're going to talk about women, birth control, and why so many experts are getting it wrong about the future. But today I want to talk about this incredibly important transformation from an agrarian society to an industrial, but I would say also industrial capitalist society, which still, it seems to me, dominates this planet, dominates the change, shapes our relationship to nature. I don't regard communism as being that different. I mean, I think they have similarities, big similarities. They're both ways of becoming industrial. So I would lump that together. But let me go ahead and talk about the great transformation to industrial capitalism. And of course you all know about this if you've been reading Karl Marx, but I think I have a different Karl Marx to reveal to you today than you perhaps have been taught or understood. So let me go ahead and talk. I am, as my colleague just said in so many words, I'm the Donald Trump of environmental history. We're both Donalds. I don't use the word Donald anymore. I call myself Don, because there's a Donald and there's Don. I'm not him. So let me go ahead and get started here. First, I will borrow from my master, Donald Trump, the word fake news. I've got some fake news to start with. What if tomorrow morning, when you wake up, you hear on the news that a new planet has been found somewhere out in space between the Earth and, say, the planet Mars? It's about the size of the Earth. It is full of life, full of water, like the Earth, lots of surface water, good soil for agriculture, and the number of people living on that planet is relatively small compared to Beijing. So how would China, how would the United States, how would all the nations of this planet be changed by the discovery of that planet out there in space? You could put out where the moon is or something like that. Collide. I'm going to give you a largely forgotten theory of modern history. That's ambitious, I know, for the next few minutes, especially a guy whose voice is the voice of the frog, but that's me. Let me review for a moment what we talked briefly about the other day, 3 modes of production, or 3 ways of life. You know all of these, but I think we need to review them and put them in this background for what we're going to be talking about. The first way of life on this planet for human beings, which goes back at least 200,000 years, down to about 10,000 years ago, was hunting and gathering, or as we say, foraging, because it also includes fishing, collecting wild plants, animals, using fire, burning the country to enhance natural production. In this way, we are not really different from all the other animals running around the planet. They are all foragers. I don't know any animal except the ants who are not foragers, basically, and even the ants do a lot of foraging. So, this way of life really bonded us to the natural world, because that's what all creatures did, humans not excepted. For 190,000 years we lived that way. If that is, if you want to talk about sustainability, that's an example, what we mean by sustainability, as much as we can. But we gave that up. We moved out of that. We didn't do it willingly, as we are now beginning to see by lots of scholars and historians. There was a lot of resistance to change in every part of the world, but we changed. We moved to the agrarian way of life, starting about 10,000 years ago, places like China, Mesopotamia, but coming in waves in many different places, involving the domestication of plants and animals. And what domestication means is basically taking over their sexuality and breeding them. That's what domestication means. Humans took over the breeding, the sexuality of other plants and animals and began to breed them, control them, manage them for greater productivity and reliability. If you tried to do that with human beings, they would scream at you. They would fight you. They would call you all kinds of bad words, but we've done it to animals. But this is a very limited idea in nature to do this. As I said earlier, and I think maybe yesterday, the first farmers on this planet were the ants and termites. They domesticated aphids, insects, and so on, but not completely. Okay. And finally, at the bottom of the page, we went through a second great transformation, the dominant way of life over the past 200 or 300 years. I would say this one begins around the year 1500, which is what most historians use to designate the modern world. So you could call this the modern world as we know it. It means finding cheap energy to produce food, producing food with machinery, trading it nationally and internationally across the oceans of the world. And I can't even see the bottom of this one. But anyway, you know what I'm talking about here. Factories. China is part of that world. It's basically followed the example of Great Britain. You do 2 things in this case. One, you engage in international trade on a huge scale. Your exports are your economy. Exports and imports, money, banking, all those things. You need business management, and at the same time, you try to move as many people out of agriculture into the cities and industry as you can do. That's the policy. And I think it applies to China as much as any place. So what causes these changes? Why did we go from one to the other? One mode of life to the other. This is one of the biggest questions historians face, but I don't find very many clear-minded answers to it. I mean, I've read a lot of literature on this, but I don't find many answers to this. Historians don't think in these terms. They think in smaller slices. But there is one man who did think about these terms, and he's influenced some people, but I think we don't understand this man quite enough. And that man, of course, is the great Karl Marx. In fact, he's the one who gave us the phrase, modes of production, which is just a fancy way of saying your way of life, how you live, how you get your food, and so on. So let's talk about Marx for just a moment or two. I found in reading early Marx before he became really famous, 1845, he wrote a phrase that almost no Marxist I've read has ever paid much attention to. I don't know why, but maybe because Marx himself actually ended up ignoring it. But in the fifth volume of his collected works, you can find this on page 32. He defines the capitalist or industrialist mode of production and how it came about. And he says it only makes its appearance with, what does he say? The increase of population. Whoa, where did this come from? Was he reading Malthus? I don't know what he was reading. He was writing about the Germans, but he says the increase of population is what forces us to go from one to the other. It's not by choice. We're forced to because we have so many babies to feed. And we're running out of food. That's his logic. So basically what I take him to have meant in that moment, that was 1845, very early Marx, is that the human desire for food and sex and reproduction, these driving forces I talked about the other day, that I'm calling human nature, led to a greater and greater density of people. It depleted natural resources. It forced major changes in modes of production. You say, with hunters and gatherers? Yes, with hunters and gatherers. It took them 190,000 years, but they, in the end, were not sustainable. They failed. They failed to gather food. They had over-harvested their environment. Now, as I said, that's a pretty good record. Nobody's perfect. But they had too many babies. How many babies would they have? Well, we know this from historical demographers. I think they have done a lot of work trying to figure out what was the population of the world when we went from foraging to farming. And the answer they've come up with is anywhere from 5 to 15 million human beings. That's not where they started. They started with 2 people, male and female, and they ended up with 100 or 5 to, I would just say 10 million. A middle ground here. Okay. So that's what we're talking about. The earth could support a foraging way of life up to about 10 or 15 million people. And after that, you've got to change. You've got to do something different. 3 years after Karl Marx wrote those words, the increase of population, he wrote the manifesto of the Communist Party, his most famous, a blistering document, a brilliant document that said communism is here now, the manifesto of the party, 1848. And in that manifesto, Karl Marx tries to understand things historically. And he does a great job, but he forgot about the increase in population. He left that out. What he talked about then was this. And it's right there in the first paragraph of the Communist Manifesto. And this, I don't think, has been absorbed by most Marxist teachers and philosophers. He starts, the discovery of America, the rounding of the Cape, that's the Cape of Good Hope in Africa, gave fresh ground for the rising bourgeoisie, gave to commerce, to navigation, to industry, an impulse never before known, and thereby to the revolutionary element in the tottering feudal society, a rapid development. Now he has a theory about why capitalism arose, because there was new ground, the discovery of the Americas. You won't find any economist in Great Britain or the United States, and probably in China today, who gives that explanation. But I think it's a profound insight, and I'll try to show you where he got that idea. So we have to put that together with the others. And I can demonstrate this. I don't know whether Karl Marx was looking at these maps, but I have 2 maps to show you. And I think they suggest exactly what he was thinking about. The first one is a map that actually appeared in the 2nd century AD or CE. It was a map by the Egyptian philosopher, scientist, mathematician Ptolemy, who lived in what we now call Egypt. He made this map in the 2nd century, but it was still being used into the time just 10 years before Christopher Columbus. you can obviously see Christopher. I don't have a pointer here. Do we? Is this a pointer kind of thing? Okay, it doesn't matter. But Ptolemy lived here in Egypt, and I can just point it. You know where Egypt is on this map, and the Mediterranean Sea. And the rest of it, he has all of Asia in there, but of course he'd never been there, and hardly very many people in Egypt had been to China or Russia, etc. He puts in these mountains. They're not real. I mean, they're sort of an idea, but he just basically throws them in. But basically, it's a map of the earth, the land, but not the water. There are no oceans on here, really. There's no Atlantic Ocean, really. There's just this little tiny fringe, and there's no Pacific Ocean. Told him he didn't know there were such oceans out there. He had no idea about them. This map was, I said, being printed in 1482, 10 years before Christopher Columbus sails off the end of the map and falls into God knows where, space. No, he didn't, of course. By the 1560s, that is, within about half a century after that Ptolemy map was reprinted that I just showed you, comes a new map. And what a dramatic change it makes. This is the most dramatic change perhaps this planet has been through in its history, was the discovery that we are a planet. We live on a round Earth. It has two sides. And this map perfectly illustrates that this planet has two sides, not one, the old world. Actually, this one includes not only the old world of Eurasia and northern Africa, but all of southern Africa and so forth. So there's a lot more to this map there too. But basically, this map gives us the Americas. And it's got an Atlantic Ocean, and it's got a huge Pacific Ocean. In fact, what we have discovered is that 70% of this planet is ocean. The land part's only 30%. Dramatic discovery that was made. This map was created by the son, a very obscure young boy. I don't know anything about him, frankly, Rommel Mercator, one of the great map makers in Germany in the 1560s, and it became the most popular map of early modern Europe and made its way to China and so forth. So it is an incredibly important historical document. And what it suggests to me is that people in the old world thought they had discovered a brand new Earth, a second Earth, teeming with all the natural resources that humans needed. I gave you here the most beautiful version I've found, and there are hundreds of versions that appeared in the wake of Christopher Columbus and others. And so now, an increasingly populous, hard-pressed people of Europe, and actually elsewhere, had available a vast, new, bounteous world to exploit. That's the fake news I just started with, but this was real news. And it came back to here. It took hundreds of years for people to understand. So what is Karl Marx now saying when he links this to the bourgeoisie and to capitalism? What is he saying? He speaks of the discovery in German of ein neues Terrain, that is fresh ground for the bourgeoisie. He means the merchants, the traders, the people of the Silk Road, all the people who have been trading from Europe all the way around Africa to Asia in particular. Their knowledge of the earth has changed. The planets seem to grow larger, and out of this comes fresh ground. And out of that fresh ground comes a new mode of production to satisfy this rising population. That's what Marx, I think, is based on his early years in the 1840s. He sort of fragments, he doesn't think it through very clearly, but it seems to me that's what he's talking about. An increase of population led to the discovery of the Americas. You can't think of Christopher Columbus without population, density of population, rising density, or any of the others. So we have a new Earth, a second Earth to exploit. And that's what capitalism wanted and needed. It's teeming with natural resources. But of course, it's not really a new planet. It's just the back of the planet we all live on. It's not like Mars, which is cold and desolate and is bombarded with ultraviolet rays. I said something about Elon Musk the other night. He's looking for another planet because he has a dream of many, many more wives and children, and he wants to put them someplace, and Texas is not going to be big enough. So, it's not like Mars, and it's not like Venus, our neighboring planets, which is so intensely hot and poisonous. You can't breathe the atmosphere there. So, this is another Earth. It's got the same chemistry, the same array of plants and animals in some ways. Incalculable potential for the human species to expand its numbers, to feed all its babies, to satisfy its desires. So there is, in early Marx at least, there's a kind of theory of human history that people have not paid enough attention to. He's basically saying a new level of population had been reached, particularly in Europe, particularly on the western edges of Europe, the Atlantic coast, and it resulted in new knowledge. And we cannot go back to Ptolemy's worldview anymore. Ptolemy's map is just for the curious. We can't go back to foraging, we can't go back to farming as a way of life for most people. After that comes knowledge that we turned into industrial capitalism as a stage in human evolution. But of course we could also expect that industrial capitalism is not the end, or industrial communism is not the end. We're going to keep inventing, transforming ourselves into new ways of life. Now, where did Karl Marx get that slide idea in the Communist Manifesto? Well, he actually does not cite anybody, but I know where he got it. He got it from this guy, Adam Smith, the great founding father of capitalism, a British economist, famous man, and he got it from Adam Smith's book, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations, published in 1776. And when you go to that book and you get to the very back of it, this is what Adam Smith sticks in. Just stuck it in there, no context. The discovery of America, he says, he writes in the back of the Wealth of Nations, and the passage to the East Indies by the Cape of Good Hope are the two greatest and most important events recorded. I don't know why this keeps cutting off the bottom part of this. Could anybody adjust this in some way? Well, I mean, it was all, I worked it out on my computer, so I don't know where, so you can see it. Yeah, I guess it is. I'm sorry, but that passage from Adam Smith is really one of the, he says the most important event in history is the discovery of the New World and this world trade development that takes place. Wow. He sticks it in the back of the book instead of in the front. Why? I guess he doesn't know what to do with it. I think he didn't know himself what the implications were. But Adam Smith says this is more important than Jesus or Confucius. It's more important than the Virgin Mary. It's more important than everything. It's one of the greatest important events in history. Well, in other words, it's a dream world. It's a kind of world that people start dreaming about, imagining. They found their dream world. They need some fresh ground. It's like Elon Musk looking for a planet. He's doing exactly what they were doing. What it means is an Earth without limits. We don't even see any limits now. And economic growth can go on forever. It can become the number value of a people. And it has become the economic, the fundamental value of any government on this face of the earth. We want more economic growth. How successful we are is measured in terms of GNP, gross national product, and economic growth. But it's basically an infinite idea. There can be no end to it. It will exist forever and ever because there is a whole new planet to exploit. So I've covered all that so far. So where did Adam Smith get this idea? Karl Marx got it from Adam Smith. Where did Adam Smith get the idea? Well, these guys are all plagiarists. They are plagiarizing, stealing other people's ideas. But at least Adam Smith puts a footnote in and tells where he got it. He got it from a book called Histoire philosophique et politique by a Frenchman, a book that was published in 1770, just 6 years before Adam Smith's book. This is the source. He's an ex-priest. He was kicked out of the Catholic Church. He became an 18th century French philosopher and historian, part of the Enlightenment. And his name is Guillaume Thomas Raynal. And the very first words, they're in French here in the corner, is Il n'y a point on, and I won't go any further. I'll just translate it here for you. This is my translation, but I think it's pretty good because I did study French. He says, there's never been an event as interesting for the human species in general and for the peoples of Europe in particular as the discovery of the New World and the passage of the Indies by way of the Cape of Good Hope. Does that sound like an echo of Adam Smith? Yeah, that's where Adam Smith got it. And that's where Karl Marx got it. But here's what Raynal goes on to say. Then, he's talking about the discovery of Columbus, Christopher Columbus. Then began a revolution in commerce, in the power of nations, in the way of life, the industry, and the government of all peoples. That's pretty damn big. That's sweeping. In fact, I break this down into 5 revolutions that came out of Christopher Columbus, and they all lead to the modern era. There was a revolution in commerce. That's the first one that Raynal, or I will call it simply capitalism. I'm not going to go through all of this again, but basically it's more than a cultural shift. It's not just coming out of attitudes toward work or Protestantism or anything like this. It's coming out of a fundamental material shift, the opening up of knowledge and of materiality in the new world. Trade networks expand to cover now the entire planet. Very important event in this. And the capital that is acquired from that trade all over the planet, the mix of resources from the new world into the old world, all of that capital is invested back home in Europe. And invested where? Well, I think you know where. It's used to move people from the rural areas into the city, and it's used to create jobs for them in what? Factories. The Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution is not that important. It's only a small part of all this. People always put it up as the biggest thing ever, but it's not that important. It's a consequence, not the cause of anything. Anyway, now I can't seem to get this. Okay, let's see. This okay. In that list I just gave you, embedded, he doesn't bring it out because he's a Frenchman and he doesn't know anything about this, really, because France is behind England. The Industrial Revolution, new technologies and mass production. So it means a shift away from little cottage industries, localized production and consumption, to the factory system and centralized technology. And Raynal, as I say, living in rather unindustrialized France, did not understand this one so well. So, capitalism's answer to a European population food crisis can be summed up under 5 imperatives. Find new lands. That's the first one. 2, encourage human migration. 3, shift to manufacturing at home. Find and exploit a new energy source, which of course were the fossil fuels, coal and oil. Expand world trade. There you have, I think, the program of the capitalist revolution, which is now the dominant revolution on this planet, not the last one. And eventually these will be felt far beyond Great Britain and Western Europe. I know there's an effort now going on among many historians to say, oh, that didn't really matter. It didn't influence us. What was mattering is what we were doing here at home. I don't believe this at all. I don't think Karl Marx believed it. I don't think anybody who's looked at this can say that it had no effect beyond Great Britain or France. It was a world-changing event. And it begins with textiles, cloth, making clothes. And where did the cotton come from of the Industrial Revolution? It came from the Americas. It was a kind of cotton that didn't break. The threads didn't break when you put them into machines, and therefore they began to import it and to use it, and created, of course, cotton goods everywhere. And cotton became a global crop, the first really global crop. The revolution that right now left out was the scientific revolution. And I would put it in here too, but I'm not going to say anything more about it. But we're talking about, it starts with knowledge, and the increase of knowledge through discovery. And this is what David Wooten's book is about. If you're interested in this aspect of the scientific revolution, I think the best book I have seen on this subject is Wooten's The Invention of Science, A New History of the Scientific Revolution. And he compares it very much to the discovery of the New World. We didn't have science before that discovery. We had knowledge, but we didn't have this kind of scientific knowledge we talk about today. And particularly that knowledge starts with the concept, according to Wooten, of a terra aqueous globe. That is, a planet made up of huge amounts of ocean, as well as land. Terra aqueous, that's how I interpret it, what he means here. A planet dominated by oceans. And I would add that Darwin and the Darwinian revolution of the 19th century are inconceivable without the discovery of the Western Hemisphere, and so also the rise of modern biology and ecology. The whole field of ecology comes out of that. A lot of things come out of it. We've got this great work by Alfred Crosby, my good friend and colleague in the United States who died several years ago. Alfred Crosby's The Columbian Exchange, about all the unforeseen, unintended consequences that came. Massive population movements among people and their domesticated plants and animals was one of the biggest. New lands in the Americas absorbed Europe's surplus population, and were then supposed to raise food surpluses and provide markets for manufactured goods. And not just in North America, but South America, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, all these different parts of the world. Before the year 1920, that's of course early 20th century, it has been estimated that 80 to 100 million people migrated out of Europe, mainly out of Europe, and to the Americas, and they're still coming. They're still coming. And of course the national origins are different. They've come from China, they've come from Japan, they've come from the Philippines, they've come from Southeast Asia, India. We just had one of them, at least a daughter of a refugee or a migrant, run for the presidency and lose. But Donald Trump's family came from Germany, Scotland, as mine did. And Kamala Harris's family, as you know, came from Africa, Jamaica, and from India. And we're still adding them. The United States adds legally every year at least 1 million new citizens per year, and perhaps 1 million more coming across the border without documents. So that's, of course, a huge political issue, but I'm not going to get into that. But I think the impact of all of this on the old world has been just as great as it was the other way around. The impact on the Americas by the Europeans and all these migrants who brought their livestock, their plants, their cultural ideas, their pocketbooks, their labor. This becomes a huge material change in the human condition. And as I said earlier, it inspires dreams of infinite wealth to make Homo sapiens great. Our first MAGA, or whatever Trump likes to call himself, starts right here. He's just coming out of it, like so many immigrants did. I would say that human nature itself has been changed by this discovery. What do I mean? It increased human fertility for a while, dramatically, and then the human population began, at least the human population has grown dramatically, But the fertility of women has changed dramatically too, and I want to get into that next time. So it all begins with a rising population. The population of Europe is going up, up, up after the Black Plague or the Black Death. And remember from Marx, the level of population forces changes. You can't evade that. So what was the population before and after the discovery of the New World, the second Earth? Here's a chart showing it, and again, it's a little bit off the charts, but if you go back to the year 1400, this is before, it's before Zhang He, it's before Columbus, it's before all these great adventurers and navigators. The population of the world, historical demographers have to make estimates. These figures are a little bit soft and political. 350 million. So we've gone from hunting and gathering, peaking at about 10 million. Now we have 350 million people living in an agrarian world. By 1500, that's just a few years after Columbus, that has gone up by 100 million people in 100 years. That's an enormous increase. And it just keeps going year by year because people are having more babies and the babies are surviving. By the time you get to 1804, Columbus is history. But the population of the world, now we can count it pretty reliably, has risen to 1 billion human beings. And it does not stop there. The bottom of this chart should have shown you what the current population of the world is. You all know what it is, I think. But think about it for just a second. It's now 8.2 billion. That is, since 1804, in a little over 200 years, we have added over 7 billion people to the planet. And most of that came in my lifetime. When I was a little kid, it was in the United States, we had 150 million. Now we have 350 million. So that is the size of all this. Is that not important? I don't see any historians really paying attention to these figures. We have now reached 8 billion. That is an incredible success for a species, but it's also our doom. So, my argument. Human behavior is not, as I'm repeating from the other night, not determined only by culture. It is determined by sexuality, by human nature, by having babies. That is, we are not taught to do all. You don't have to be taught to have a baby. Nobody has to take you aside and say, here's what you have to do. Babies mean this. Maybe your mother or father tried to tell you about the birds and the bees, but we don't normally have to be taught this in the past. You don't have to buy a book to read. You don't have to take a class at college to figure out how to have a baby. So there is a deeper inherited human nature that we have, which is independent of culture and very powerful. Food and sex are at the center of that. And they, as they drive our history is being made. I don't say this is the only way history is made. It's more important than we have realized, and in fact, let me give you a charming little story about all this, which will illustrate beyond statistics. Isn't this a handsome dude here, this guy? His name's Francis, big blue eyes and wonderful mustache. I wish I had his mustache. And so he looks like a choir boy. He's got this collar around him. He looks like a little saint, a little boy who's going to church. Who was he? He was perhaps, with Christopher Columbus and Magellan, the greatest explorer in human history. He went, I'll show you in a moment, his path. And if you don't choke on that, well, there's nothing that will faze you. Who was he? He was the oldest of 12 children, all boys. His mother and father produced 12 children on a very small farm in western Britain. He looked around him and said, I got to get out of here. He ran to sea. He only lived about 20 miles, 30 kilometers or so from the ocean, the Atlantic. He ran away to sea, and with the help of some relatives, he became slave trader. He was in on the slave trade, taking people from Africa to the New World. He was profiting from that. He became a pirate, stopping the Spanish ships and stealing all their gold bullion. and silver that they were bringing back. He was a discoverer. He made maps. Some have even said he was the founder of the British Empire. That the British Empire starts with this guy and his exploits. But I would say he was also in some ways typical of many people in modern early Europe, as more and more people were packed densely on the land and began to look to the oceans for relief.
He's an officer of the British Navy.
Yeah, he became so later, under Queen Elizabeth I. She appointed him, but at first he was not. He was a freelancer. He was just a businessman at sea.
What was his highest rank?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know anything about his highest rank. But Queen Elizabeth certainly loved him. Every time he came home, he brought her big boxes of riches from the Orient, So she loved him. She knighted him. He was a knight of the realm. So here's where he comes from. This is a little country, an island. This is Great Britain. And I think you can see on this map how much brown space there is. The brown space is usually rock, mountains, hills, with bad soils. Almost all of Wales is mountains, and so forth. There's very little that's just pure green agricultural land possibilities on this map. And this is where Francis Drake comes from. He comes from a place right here, a farm on the edge of Dartmoor. Dartmoor is now a national park. I haven't been out to look for his farm, to be honest. I'd love to go when I can. I'm getting old. I can't travel as much as I once did. But, I'd like to go see this because I can imagine what it is because I know the Dartmoor from other trips. Let me see if I can. That's what it looks like. Now, I'm sure his farm didn't look like that. He got some good farmland, better than that. But it's rocky. You can't grow crops on Dartmoor. There's a lot of Great Britain that's like this. So it's a wasteland in the eyes of the Brits for a long time. It figures in Sherlock Holmes and so on. But it's now a national park. But he grows up on a farm very close to this, a small farm. How are you going to make a living here if you're one of 12 boys, kids? You can't. Why did Drake's parents have so many children? Were they crazy? No, they weren't crazy. I think they were full of sexual hunger. They had sexual needs to fulfill. I don't think they read the Bible or anything like that to learn how to do this. And how could they expect 12 sons to survive on a tiny farm like this? And this is the path that Sir Francis Drake took in his great navigation, which comes less than 100 years after Christopher Columbus. This line starts up here in England, up in the corner. It goes down around South America. He's following the course mainly, not of Christopher Columbus, but of another man, Magellan, the great Spanish explorer Magellan. But Magellan did not go up the west coast of South America, up the west coast of North America, right up to where I live now, Oregon, Drake's Bay, and north of that. And then he stopped because the weather was getting cold, and he thought if he went farther, he'd run into icebergs, which he would have. He couldn't have gotten through. So instead, he sails off. He just misses Hawaii, and ends up in Indonesia, what is now Indonesia, and sails all the way home around Africa back to England. He is the first ship's captain, the first in history, to circumnavigate the whole globe. This guy I would call the first planetary human being. He'd been around the whole thing. Nobody else was. Christopher Columbus, of course, got stopped. And here's where he ended up. Queen Elizabeth gave him so much money he could buy a castle of his own, and he bought this one. And he died a very wealthy man. I would say he's not only the first planetary citizen, but he's the first capitalist to do really well out of it all. But he shows what capitalism was doing. So, sexual reproduction led to a population crisis right in the Drake family. Overcrowding, land degradation, growing poverty. This occurs all up and down the entire Euro-Atlantic shore. It was an area that was becoming deeply overpopulated. Spain, Portugal, France, the Netherlands, Belgium, Great Britain. And people turned then to the Atlantic Ocean, and in doing that, they've accidentally discovered an entirely unsuspected Western Hemisphere, which they pillaged, robbed, explored, and brought disease to, the native peoples living there. We don't know how many native peoples are living there. The estimates go from about 30 million to 60 million. That was a lot. But they had no resistance to what was going on. And nor did the English and all the others who invaded and took the land have any idea what effects they were having. Nobody knew. They didn't have that kind of knowledge. And so on, they went on to settle the Americas, Australia, colonies across Asia, the beginnings of Western imperialism and colonialization, etc. And today, 1 billion humans live in the Americas. 1 billion, representing most of the racial and ethnic groups of the world. I've already said the U.S. is a big home. The U.S. alone has created a $30 trillion a year economy out of the lands they expropriated from the native peoples. But they're not the only people in history to invade and migrate. They're only the most recent. So now the question comes, what next? Where can we humans go next to feed and support our 8+ billion people? The biggest question of our time, I think. And then there's another question here I put in. Is there a new way, a fourth way, or a fifth way, or a sixth way coming? People are talking about the sustainable society. In many countries of the world, including China, they're talking about the ecological civilization, whatever that means. I think it comes from a German, actually. It's maybe heresy, but I think it comes from Erwin Fetscher of the Frankfurt School of Philosophy in Frankfurt, Germany, but it's now included in the Chinese Constitution. So people are trying to think about what's coming next, what's going to be the next. But I don't think words, phrases, whatever they are, bring the great transformations of the earth. I don't think that's where it started. It never started before like that, and I don't think it's going to start in the future like that. And now, in the 21st century, it's not only the old familiar increases in human population that we're talking about, that Karl Marx was talking about, which lead to higher and higher densities. It's changing the earth. Something else is happening now that is also part of human nature. I would say it's now human nature's reaction to the growing density. Our inner passions and instincts are looking around us and saying we're awfully crowded. Things are getting expensive. I've got a kid to put through college, and I don't have the money for it. I can't have 12 kids. More specifically, I would argue, and I'm going to talk about this on Friday, it is the nature of women which is at the center of future change. Women taking control of their own fertility and bringing planetary, social, and ecological change. I think this is where we should be looking in the future. It's not going to be surplus population, but with knowledge and with science and with our changes going on in human nature, with changes going on in the status of women in particular. I think we are seeing planetary change, social change, and we're going to see a transformation. We're not going to be living in an industrial, communist, industrial, capitalist world in the future. I don't know when. I'm not a prophet in any specific way. You can bring me back when it happens, and I'll defend myself. I'll be dead by then. Okay, I'm about finished. More on this on Friday. I finished for this afternoon. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm ready to hear your. No, Lu Yang. Where are you, Lu Yang?
So let's turn the floor over to Professor Lu Yang.
Okay, great to see you. It's truly a privilege. Can people hear my voice?
Yes.
Okay. My voice has been low because I've been sick for 2 days. So try to keep it so...
we went to the same bar.
Okay. Yeah, Don, it's great to see you, and also it's wonderful to hear your lecture. I also listened to your first lecture. I think those are connected. So how should I? First, let me thank Hou Shan to arrange this, inviting me to be a discussant. My colleague in the history department, Professor Newker, gave a very lavish words about my erudition, but to be honest, none of those I really deserve. But I think this book Don just released really challenged the entire history profession. So as someone who is well within the category of traditional historian, I'm actually quite eager to find a way to have this conversation with Don, who really inspired me to study environmental history, although by training I'm a historian of texts or archaeological findings, but and about medieval China is so distant from the subject matter, but Don has inspired me to read environmental history. Actually, this morning we have a lecture, have a seminar at the Yanjing Academy, actually reading two works on environmental history in China. Unfortunately, I also, because of sickness, I couldn't attend there. But I encourage my students to attend this lecture. Okay, so how should I approach this? Because we have two different audiences. First, I think it's important to make a few remarks. So I'm very eager to hear Don's response, and I also look forward to hearing his further explanation of this very grand narrative of planetary history. But we also have a large audience who probably prefer the Chinese language. So what I would do is probably I would just very quickly make some comments in English, so for Don to give a further sort of clarification, and then I will say this in Chinese. Is this okay? Hello?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I will do this. All right. I spent 2 days actually very quickly going through the book, which I think has it's really a demanding job, although many of the episodes contained in this book touch upon topics and figures we historians usually are, not all, but at least a large number of them we're familiar with. But Don gave a very different, Professor Wolster gave a very different interpretation, putting it in a very different framework. And I think that makes commenting job particularly difficult because I try to find a way to go. But I think as a traditional historian, I do recognize the importance of connecting human history with the exploration or exploitation of the earth through its history, especially during the last 500-600 years. In the book, I think Don mentioned the second earth, very important, although we all know about exploration, discovery of the Western Hemisphere, but the Don's book gives far greater weight on such discovery in changing the mode of, say, using Marxist word, production, right? Although his use of this word very different from Karl Marx. And this really changed our entire perception about the earth, about human world, about wealth, everything. And comparing to the so-called first earth, a period in which humans began to develop settlements, communities, and began to develop a certain mode of production, whether agrarian or commercial. The first Earth seem to link human activities closer to the nature. It's more, using Dang's word, you have 109,000 years of history before a more recent one. So if there is a sustainability, this is the one. So I think, but my interest as a historian is more on the practical side. I really want to know how historians who study social organizations, political system, or cultural perspective, or even religion, can be part of this. And so my comments will probably concentrate in this area. And I think Dang attempts to interpret the origins of human organizational models through the concept of planet of desire, so which is closely tied with this idea of a second Earth. And this second Earth is used to explain the prerequisites that led humanity into an affluent society or society of abundance, as the word you use, over the past 500 or 600 years. And the discovery of the New World, but you also warns us that such an opportunity only comes once, and so that humanity's chances of finding a similar transformation for future opportunities are rather slim. So that's the general impression. I mean, I can be wrong, but that seems to be. So this book is really a very powerful, gives a very powerful voice, promoting the importance of understanding the true driving force when material, or I think it's mostly material force, right? If you consider human sex, reproduction part of this material world, then that is the true driving. So that really shaped all the social political organizations. Everything else, by comparison, looks rather pale. And so that's. And you mentioned both. You quoted today. I think last lecture you quoted Mengzi. Very interesting. Mengzi 实色性也. But now in this lecture you quote Karl Marx. And it's worth noting that both of them are actually moralists. I think you pointed out this quite succinctly in your writing. In your writing there, because both of them believe that productive force. Marx believed that productive force determined everything. And he assumed that the era of communism would be one where in which material scarcity no longer exists. And similarly, Mengzi emphasized that 实色性也, but also he acknowledged that the establishment of order, of social order, involves the control of these human instincts. And Dang's view very much diverged from these so-called traditional historic views. I don't know whether you can characterize Mengzi as a historian, probably not, but he actually hates his history. We have evidence to show that he really hates history. He hates the account, historical account, in writing, because he prefers a moral explanation to historical events. So if he sees historical accounts that really contradict to his moral stories, then he make a famous claim, 尽信书不如无书, right? If you always believe the book, you would rather not to have it. Okay. And so particularly the emergence of highly centralized empires, for example, you mentioned in the book, with concentrated power and wealth, is an outcome largely driven by humanity's survival desires. Now that seems to be one of the central messages. But in contrast, traditional historians often argue that these organizations arose precisely to restrain human nature, a point on which perhaps postmodern thinkers might find a common ground with Mengzi, with Mencius. In my view, I think Dang's insights seem to suggest that these organizational structures are more conducive to humanity's exploitation of the Earth's resources and ecology because we believe that the second Earth over the past 500 years has enabled humanity to perceive unprecedented possibilities, which itself signifies a major transformation on both conceptual and lifestyle levels, on these two levels. But could we then extend the organizational demands created by this transformation to earlier human organizational forms? Because as a historian working on medieval China, the first interest on the practical level is to know how our study of organizations of like 8th, 9th century China or Asia can be part of this narrative. So I'm more interested to know how the organizational scheme, ideas, and perceptions came before the discovery of this new Earth can be explained in the same way as you did, because you argue that we changed our view so much, we changed our perception because of that discovery. So I assume that it's something different. But in the meantime, I'm also a bit puzzled by the fact that you also seem to suggest that the driving force throughout human history is the human instincts. So in other words, on one hand, the later human developments was undoubtedly inspired by previous form of organization. For example, the British Empire and American Republic probably view themselves as a second coming Roman Empire or Roman Republic. So, and their form of social organizations was constrained very much by a Western political tradition. So they built their system based on certain ideal, and that constrained them to do things. So how can this sort of development, what I want to say is this suggests that there is the formation of social organizations follows its own logic, not necessarily, if I may, directly addressing the demands of human nature. And the existence of religion will further complicate this matter, I think. So my question now comes to my question part. I think my question is, when writing the history of the planet, how can the historical connections involved in traditional history be more effectively integrated into this new grand narrative, this new scheme? If we take human desire as a primary driving force of historical developments, is there a danger that we get into a certain type of oversimplification? Although I'm firmly on the downside. I think any sweeping and important sort of a statement about human history by nature will be a bit oversimplified. That's not a bias. That's part of the historical writing. But still, I want to know, if this kind of assumption, one very similar, although I think Don mentioned, not in today's lecture, not in the last lecture, but I think in your book, this reminds me of Freud's use of human unconsciousness to define a history of humanity. Will this be similar to that? And the second Earth, or the planet of desire, aims to help us understand why we're facing today's environmental crisis. I can see that two roles in this book. One is giving this grand narrative and push historians to think deeper about the role of humanity and the limited possibility of the planet, of the Earth. These two things push historians to think more deeper. The other is a bit also prophetic, because I think Don although I'm not sure whether it's a pessimistic or rather optimistic note, and towards the end, arguing agreeing that humans can make the right decisions, even at this critical juncture. But on some other occasions, I also see a very gloomy picture of the outcome of our world in the next half century or so. And so my last comment will be the outcome may ultimately fail to discuss the humanity's historical development itself, that is the relationship between the human cognition and behavior, and the decision they make to construct the humanities. And we should also keep in mind that the current emphasis in the world, although there is a sense of collaborations on environmental issues, but we also see that the nation's interest very much felt along the line of nation state. I see deep concerns about the fertility rate in China, right? Birth rate in China, and Chinese are also now, I think, pretty much worried about Europeans and Japanese for some strange reason I don't want to explain, but obviously they think that those should produce more babies. And in contrast to this, actually, many Chinese scholars working are very afraid of the growing population in North America, especially in the United States, because that signifies a kind of potential of labor force for the future. So this is very much along the line of nation states. So how can this sort of global sort of connection between human instincts and desires and the planet, exploration of the planet, can address those questions? Because I'm a historian, and I need to work, I'm sure other historians want to do very similar things. So we need to, we don't want to be on the opposite side of Professor Wolster, rather we want to join you. And to say this also because I think you are great humanists. Your writings involve such a degree of humanities that very much inspired me to get interested in environmental history. It's not a cold kind of analysis of environment, but rather you put humans at the very center, almost in every single book you produced in the past. So my last question is, what is the difference between this, or is there any difference between this one and all the previous works that you have produced? Okay, I think that's all I want to say. Do I need to repeat this in Chinese?
Can you? Can you remember all that?
也许我非常荣幸的，因为那个OK， 那我就简单的讲一下我的基本的。其实博斯特教授是对我影响非常大。我跟他有过同事的岁月，但是呢，他对我的影响其实是多方面的。尤其我觉得我知道环境史的重要性，其实就是和这个博斯特教授共处才开始的。而且他给我的，而且他对于他并不只是我们会想象说，环境史可能跟其他的历史会很不一样，但实际上，沃斯特教授对 historiography 对历史的书写，对历史的方法是有高度的敏感的啊，所以他在很多方面其实他是把我们一般的研究文献的研究这个人类其他的活动，宗教也好，社会也好。这些方面其实跟他的研究是密切相关的，他是一个非常博学啊，所以我觉得有这样的一个机会，但是我确实个人不是一个环境史的专家，那么我觉得他的这一次的讲座和他第一次讲座就是3天以前的那个讲座是很有关联的。他这个书我很高兴，他这个书其实中文版的出版比这个英文版还要早。所以当然那个侯申老师的翻译，侯申老师的文笔，我觉得我当然不是那么了解侯申老师的英文的文笔，但是我觉得侯申老师的中文的文笔很好的继承了这个沃斯特教授的特色，就是非常有力度语言很优美，而且很有力度，而且 也很有精确性，所以这个翻译但是因为是中文翻译，所以我只能够从这里边有限的体会到这个Worcester 教授的这个中文英文的这个 prose 它的英文版明年要出版。那么我的问题其实是这个，就是作为传统的就在他的书里面，他认为研究社会以往的研究人类社会的历史学者是属于比较传统的历史学者就哪怕包括后现代，就是你的考量并不是从地球的这个演变就是地球跟人的关系不是地球本身，是地球跟人的关系通过过去这10000年特别是过去这500年有一个飞跃，然后它是用第二个地球，就是说哥伦布发现美洲彻底改变了我们整个对于人类对于这个财富的欲望当然他的这个讲法我刚才英文的 comments 里面没有说，我们如果看一下这个Pomeranz 彭木兰的 Great Divergence他也提到，就是说美洲的发现是使得西方的资本主义能够找到一个出口一个无尽的出口，这个是彻底在竞争中彻底超越了中国传统的这个民清社会的那种经济力量的一个根本性的原因。我们当然我们历史学家常常把我们的这个重点会放在人的意识上，就是人的认知怎么去影响。而我们有的时候，至少我会这样，但是呢，如果把它归之于一个非常客观的一个因素，比如说发现美洲使得欧洲的资本主义能够突然超越，而不是欧洲内部的制度。那么现在Don的这个就 Professor Worcester 的这个讲法，就是这个发现改变了人类整个的。所以我们过去500年里边，使得我们跟这个之前可能是几千年甚至上万年，以他的这个描述，就是人类的跟自然的关系是更有机的是一种更来自于土壤回归于土壤的这么一个关系那么工业革命这等等出现，就完全改变了这个那么他认为我们现在人类已经到了这个第二地球的一个临界点上这个临界点可能过了这个之后，人类就会面临巨大的危机，而且我们的机会要发现第3个地球，恐怕是非常非常渺茫的所以那么从我的个人的角度呢，因为我是历史学者，那么我就想问他，就是第一，他讲的这个这种关系里边似乎呈现2个方面，第一个是把整个人类的历史都看作是这么一种人类的欲望驱动而造成的另外一个，他把过去500年这个第二看成是一个截然的一个分水岭。那么这2个关系究竟怎么来调和？就是历史学者，尤其是我们涉及到古代的社会组织等等，人类发展它有它自己的社会组织，对吧？他引用了马克思，引用了孟子，但是这2个人其实都是道德为主的马克思的这个无产阶级革命其实是基于道德原则就是你不能剥削，是吧？但是那个孟子同样的，孟子食色性也，但是孟子同样认为社会的这个秩序恰恰是对这个食色性的一个限制。所以古代社会它在建立它的体制，在建立它确实有这一个层面，就是去控制去限制，而不是无限的扩张。那么能不能把他的这个论断推演到更早的时期这个是一个。另外一个，人类的历史发展它是自身有一个轨迹的，有一个自我的逻辑的，是吧？比如说大英帝国他可能把自己看作是罗马帝国的再现或者这个美利坚合众国在建立那一刻很可能他重视重视历史上罗马共和国的政治遗产，所以他们在建立他们的体制、他们的制度的时候，他们会很大程度上会做这样的一个连接，就是他们的体制是建立在这个内在的传统上的，就是有这个内在的逻辑。那么如果照当现在这么说的话， 那么这种内在的逻辑和它的这个就是人类的人性的这个趋势之间，该怎么来调整？就是我们普通的历史学家如果在谈论那些问题的时候，该怎么进入到和这个环境史的对话？这是我特别关心的。那么有没有一种可能？当然，我觉得沃斯特教授的这本书，他其实是选择了一些非常重要的人类历史上的发展的一些片段，他用了对我们历史学家来说，其中的很多人我们也熟悉，但是他是以一个完全不一样的这个框架来解释这些现象。那么这个里边当然，因为它要贯穿始终有一个主题，所以它很难免会有一种可能会过度的简化。当然，我觉得任何有力量的历史的研究，其实一开始都是简化的。你说马克思不简化吗？其实都是简化的。所以简化是它的本质，只有提出来以后受到重视，然后大家才进入去做进一步的。所以，那么但是呢，这种简化会不会让我们感觉，比如说这个就跟弗洛伊德用人的无意识来解释人类的历史的发展，有一种类似之处所以我就问这些问题，我希望能够利用这个机会，能够其实也帮助我自己能够听到他的这个进一步的解释好，那我要说的就这些，已经够多的。
Would you like to give
Yes,
Okay, I think I'm done. Okay.
Could you state very clearly and simply and succinctly, the second question you had? You have three of them.
Yes. My second question is whether this kind of how this approach, planet Earth, this approach can avoid a certain simplification, oversimplification
Okay.
that allows traditional historian who studied institutions, society, religion, culture to be part of it.
Okay.
What I'm worried is we know this is important, but we can hardly get into a meaningful dialogue because the emphasis traditional historians place seem to be characterized as a misconception of human history. Somehow, I'm not sure whether I'm correct or not on this point. So that's my central question.
Okay.
So the people who study these things can be. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Liang, and this was wonderful to hear, and I'm glad to have this response to you. I first want to absolve my translator who's sitting here from any guilt in this book. I mean, she just translated the words and brilliantly did so, but the arguments are mine, and if there's any oversimplification, it's not in her.
But you said that blame the
Yeah.
translator for any fault.
Well, those are minor faults. Am I oversimplifying the past? Well, I've grown up believing that all historians have oversimplified the past, including you, all of us. And in what way have we oversimplified the past? Well, I addressed this actually in my first talk. The blank slate idea, that we are all basically a blank slate when we're born. We have no nature of our own. And that it is the job of our betters, our teachers, our leaders, our philosophers, and all the humanists in the world to make us better, to implant in us a culture that is based on moral values and principles. I think this is deeply embedded in China. It's deeply embedded in the United States, but it's deeply embedded most all in the historians. They have turned us into a blank slate on which they will write moral ideals. And I am strongly opposed to this. I think the oversimplification has been going on forever. And it's basically that humans are exceptional. We're not like the rest of nature. We are moral creatures rather than creatures driven by food and sex. So I challenge the historians in this book. This book is written, you're quite right, to historians. I don't have any particular person in mind. I could say all my colleagues at the University of Kansas and all my teachers at Yale, all these people I'm challenging, because I think their view of the past and of people is very shallow, narrow, and reductive in its own way. It's not complicated, it's very reductive. So what we environmental historians are trying to do is to put something more in there. Not that praises and celebrates humanity as being something special on this planet. That's the oversimplification that I'm fighting against, and so forth. So I think when somebody accuses me of being oversimplified, I always turn around and say, "What? I am trying to complicate a world that you guys have oversimplified." And if you find my answers oversimple because they're, well, I know the first thing most historians say when you talk to them about big ideas is, well, it's more complicated than that. That is the sort of slogan of the historian's profession. It's more complicated than that. I think, yeah, okay, I'm willing to deal with complication. I know that the natural world on this planet is extraordinary. It's beyond our ability to understand completely. I think we're unable to understand ourselves completely. But I certainly don't want to reduce history to a kind of Freudian analysis or the power of the subconscious. But I think we do need to concentrate on thinking about what we mean by human nature. Now, I think there's also in this, of course, not just my rebellion against the profession of historians. And there is a rebellion in this book. I'm a rebel. I'm trying to tear down the walls that have been built. But I also have to say that I think that the world is increasingly ruled by elites of various kinds, elites. Maybe this sounds a lot like Donald Trump talking, but I think there's something to be said for the fact that the world has been run by all kinds of elites who think they know better than the rest of us, the common people. And I am sure that at a university like Peking University, it is full of elites, or would-be elites. Maybe some of you come from farmers, maybe some of you come from truck drivers and waitresses and so on.
Not so many.
Not many.
Presently.
Yeah. So I think there's a special burden on us if we really want a more egalitarian future, if we really mean that the people matter and count and they're so precious to us, that we start listening to people who don't have a PhD from Peking University or Yale or Harvard or so on. I am very much a Democrat and an egalitarian in this, and I think people are a lot more complicated and smart and moral than we give them credit for. And I would put people back into the natural world because I think the natural world is a lot more moral and smart and good than most of us recognize. We just want to organize everything into a tidy garden where everything is moral and clean and proper. And that is what I am really strongly writing against in this. I'm trying to provide another interpretation that would be different from that. Because I think the historians generally are losing their audience. People look at them and see a bunch of know-it-alls who think they are smarter and better because they have degrees and they've taken classes. A world that is ruled by people who think they have higher IQs than the rest of us. I'm putting people back into nature, yes, and trying to break down that line that separates us from the natural world. And I would go back to all those great organizations and institutions of the past and say, don't believe what those guys told you they were doing, leading us to higher morality. Look for something. I've been accused of not trusting people enough. Maybe that's part of all of this, but I wouldn't trust any leader, Joe Biden or anybody else, to tell me what was good for me. I would want to know myself, learn myself, figure it out, follow my own nature and instincts. So, yeah, I don't buy the fact that the Roman Empire was created to make people better. I think that's the way historians would like to see it, because it confirms that the world needs historians, it needs universities, it needs elites who have knowledge and better understanding of things. And so I'm not I'm not opposed to these historians. I'm one of them. But I am opposed to what I think is a kind of almost religious faith that exists among historians of what is important and their hierarchical view of the world. And I don't think there's any way I can easily say to you, okay, this is what I believe, and I don't know how it's going to affect you, but if you want to be part of this change, you're going to have to make a profound change in the way you see the world. Most of you. You're going to have to make a profound change. It's not my job to tell you how to make that or where to take it. You come forth with your own ideas. But I'm willing to listen, so on. But I do not think I have to show you how historians who do traditional history can come in and do this. I spent my life trying to figure it out. This is where I've ended up. But unfortunately, I wish I'd done all this when I was 20 years old. Then I might have written a very different kind of history. But my history books, I think, are flawed, deeply flawed, by some of the things I'm actually talking about here today. I'm sorry I've gone on too long saying this, but I don't mean to give offense to anybody. I love you all. But I tell you, this whole thing starts by my coming to China. It changed my ways of thinking about history. I grew up in America, arrogant America. I come to China, I find arrogance here. Then I think, well, this is what we are, and I get used to that. This is why I emphasize so much the existence of a human nature and not a Chinese or American or French nature, and so forth. So I think that China has had an enormous role in changing the way I think about history, about the materiality of history, about the superficiality of our moralizing, and so forth. That is really there. But I don't mean to be offensive in this. I'm just telling you what I think at this stage. I'm probably not going to write another book. I don't have the energy for it. But I thought I would at least try to put in my own mind what's been bothering me about history for so long, and the humanities in general. And I don't just point to history. I point to the social sciences and the humanities, and so on. I think this problem is there all over the place. That's why I call for much more openness to what the scientists do, and bring the sciences into our conversation, and listen to them too, because they, I think, have a more complicated view of this planet than most historians do, or humanists. There's a big challenge here to the humanities, because I don't want this building to fall down or to be destroyed. But it's got to change if it wants to really be part of a world that is increasingly listening to the sciences and is increasingly overpopulated and has environmental problems that it cannot solve, and so forth. So that's my general response. Again, thank you very much, Leon. This has been good to hear.
Thank you, Don, for your wonderful response. I actually just wanted to play the devil's advocate because.
Oh, I thought you were the moralist. You're a devil. The devil's advocate. Okay, we're both devil's advocates. I'm a devil. I know it. Okay, but thank you indeed. You did a great job, and it was very helpful to me.
Thank you.
Okay. Kai takes the privilege of the coordinator to ask you two small questions.
Okay.
So the first is another form put in Professor Lu Yang's question. So, what's your expectation for the planetary history? Is it a subfield of the environmental history, or maybe the climax, maybe some kind of highest stage of the environmental history, or just the subfield of the environmental history, or the totally different approach from different from the environment. Although it's highly connected, naturally connected. That's the first. So the second is why you leave aside Immanuel Wallerstein. You talk about Adam Smith, Marx, and Karl Polanyi, but I think maybe Immanuel Wallerstein maybe in a lower order, but I feel there is some relevance to the approach of the planet or real authentically global history. So, a small question.
Okay. Yeah, these are not small questions. Yeah, okay. Nuclear always gives me some big, hard challenge here. But am I talking about creating a subfield within history? No. I don't want to be fenced off. I don't want people to put a fence around me in the corner and say, that's environmental history. It has its own way of thinking, but the rest of us can go right on doing what we've always done. Studying culture, the history of culture. That's basically what we've always done. It's all been cultural history. I want to have a history in the future that is both ecological, material, and, of course, cultural. I don't rule it out, but I'd like to see a lot more historians who recognize the limits of what they're doing. I'd like to put a fence around other historians and say, you are a subfield, because all you do is cultural history. You want to explain everything by text, by philosophies, by ideas, by moral values. And I think that belongs in the corner. And let's go over there and visit you, and we will pet you and say, you're good. Go ahead. Keep on doing what you're doing, but the rest of us are going to enlarge the picture a little more and talk about other things than what has been talked about.
That kind of planetary synthesis, I would use the synthesis, the word to your planetary.
Yeah,
that's a kind of feeling I got from this book, from reading this book. Yeah.
It may be a synthesis. If so, I'd like the other historians who don't agree with it to come up with their own synthesis. I don't know who's done this. But I know there are lots of people writing in world history or global history, but I don't see any deeper examination of their foundations. As far as Wallerstein is concerned, I've read some of him. I mean, I gave a partial list of Marxist or influenced scholars. I didn't include him. There are a lot of others I didn't include, but my sense is that he's been mostly concerned with expanding Marxism into a third world context, and that's important to do, but it doesn't really change what I'm trying to do. The source of all of this is Karl Marx. I'd rather go back and show that even Karl Marx thought more complicatedly about the past than many of his followers today do, and I think that's true of Wallerstein too. I don't think he's a very complex man.
You said you are materialistic.
Materialistic, yeah.
But you're not kind of deterministic materialism. Is that right?
Well, to be deterministic...
Less deterministic, at least than Immanuel Wallerstein and Karl Marx, even Thomas.
I don't know what I am, Nuker. I don't know what I am. I don't really think that I'm offering a mechanistic answer to everything. In fact, I think I've argued that this population issue is very complicated to sort out. It's not something that you can just turn over to genetics, or we would never change in that sense. So I'm not a determinist in that I can offer a simple formula that fits every situation. But I am trying to explain those transformations. There are many, many other changes that have been made. They may be cultural changes. The change from one kind of music to another kind of music. I'm not trying to explain all of that in one way. Everything is determined by the mode of production or something like that, or the way of life. But I think unless we can explain why we moved from a foraging to an agricultural society, how we explain that, or whether we explain it or not, is a rather important thing that historians ought to be talking about. Not so that we can predict the future, because I can't predict where things are going to go, But I think that if once we free ourselves from the current paradigm in the field of history, I think there's more hope in the world. That ordinary people with their instincts, their genes, their passions, are capable of making a good future, and that the world actually has very positive things about it, that we don't need to cry every time something happens and feel guilty and so forth. That is part of it. And I think there's hope when I think about, as I will talk about on Friday, when population density becomes an issue and people begin to say, wait a minute, 8 billion is quite a lot of people. In one lifetime, to add almost 5 billion in my lifetime, 5 or 6 billion, that's a lot. Why don't we get concerned about that? Why don't we ask how that is changing us? Why do we just take this for granted as a good thing instead of a bad thing? And why do governments always go crying? Because governments always want more babies. Well, for a while, yeah. China was very unusual.
Yeah, 2 decades.
But to a great extent, most governments have been pro-natalist from the beginning. They want more people, more armies, as we know people have said. So
the moral problems here are so complicated. Yeah. So another question. Yeah. Another quick question. So as for the, you want me to stop?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
You're the boss.
As for the desire problem, how would you think the role, in a very general term, role of the religion? Some religion have the natural band to asceticism, to curb, to diminish the human desire, like Puritanism.
Yeah, I know.
Buddhism.
I grew up in that. And I had to liberate myself from the church.
You have a kind of revivalism.
Yeah. Well, of course, Munches would say we have these moral sprouts in us. But he also said this, and I think this is the most important thing I got from Munches, was he said, don't pull too hard on those sprouts. Try to make them grow bigger and bigger so hard. Relax. Have your moral values, but don't let them become absolute principles that drive society. So that's what I took him to mean. And I think that's what Darwin said, basically. The moral sprouts are in us. They're also part of human nature, to moralize. And so that's one of the capacities we have. What function does it serve is what Charles Darwin said. Where does that come from? How does that come out of evolution on this planet? Are we the only species that has moral sprouts?
Okay.
That's what I think he would say.
So, truly words of wisdom. Yeah. So that's our Jojo. Jojo is a former student, PhD student here, now in Shanghai University.
Many years ago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Good afternoon, Professor Worcester. It's a pleasure to meet you again here in Beijing. And as Professor Hoshen suggested, we actually met before during 2017 and Daniel Rogers' book talk. Yeah, so back then I was still a PhD student in the history department, and there are actually 2 of the members of my PhD committees on that table. I'm kind of nervous over them, not you. And actually I have a question, because your talk actually reminds me of some series I've been recently reading. And recently there has been a new theory known as techno-feudalism or information feudalism, which basically suggested that we are at a turning point of a new age and of an old age and a new age of capitalism, and the moguls at the Silicon Valley, they are just like the big lords of late feudal Europe, and we ordinary people are like the serfs or tenants. They rule over, and of course everybody is waiting for the discovery of a second planet, as Elon Musk has promised to us. He will build one on the Mars. And what makes this theory very dubious to me is that one of its premises is that human desire for capitalism is natural and inherent, and therefore capitalism is inevitable. And as you said in your talk, the discovery of the new continent changed people's knowledge, changed our imagination of the geography, the space of population, but human nature itself will not be changed by the discovery. And human nature is always ambitious, greedy, and unsatisfied, and namely, it's always capitalist. It's a capitalist human nature. And in the end of your lecture, you provided an alternation to this capitalist human nature, which you suggested is the nature of woman. But the question is that the nature of woman, just as woman, was not invented in recent 2 or 3 centuries. And my question is that whether this means that you have a pessimistic view of human history or so-called human progress over the last centuries, or are you suggesting that the progress has happened, but mainly or only happened to women? And also another question is that how would you comment on the idea that the development of human nature, or probably man's nature, over the last centuries has taken us back to the late Middle Ages, bringing us a different form of feudal rule? Thank you.
You know, I can hardly understand what you said. You speak very fast, so I'm sorry, but I asked my colleague here whether she got... Can you sum up what she just asked? I got part of it, I think.
Yeah, I think that Dr. suggested that she read very recently that there is the so-called capitalist human nature suggested by you in some way.
I got that part, yeah.
You read very recently capitalist human nature.
Actually, I'm bringing a new theory, which is called feudalism, techno-feudalism. It's suggested, like after 2 or 3 centuries, the development of history. So, like the development of capitalism actually brings us again to a new version of feudalism. We are at a different version of feudalist age right now. We are ruled by the lords of the Silicon Valley, like Elon Musk, the Facebook lords, like us. And the 2 questions I'm bringing up, the first is about the nature of woman. You suggested at the end of your lecture, you said that it's like, maybe I'm saying it wrong, but it's like you are suggesting that the alternation about the progress of a recent history is to bring in the nature of women and let women take control of their own fertility so that we can change the capitalist human nature. And my question is that how is that kind of nature of woman different from the human nature in the past 2 or 3 centuries, different from this capitalist human nature that man has brought to our history?
Okay, I think I get you a little more. This is a huge and complex question that I could probably take an hour or 2 at least to talk about, but I won't. My voice is almost gone. If you were here the other day, I talked about human nature as being, 1, not fixed. This is an ancient idea that basically Christianity's been based on and so many other. We are either born good or bad, basically bad, needing to be reformed. I've argued that human nature is evolving just like the rest of nature. Nature is not today what it was 4.5 billion years ago on this planet. Life has appeared, and it's flowered in all kinds of ways, complicated ways. And so is human nature. It's not fixed, it changes, and perhaps changes much slower than the development of cultures, the evolution of culture, but nonetheless it changes. And it also, I said the other day, varies from individual to individual. There is no, we really should be speaking about human natures. There's so much diversity, variation on this planet, that is not cultural in nature, but is biological in nature. We can see this certainly in sexuality. There's not just one way to be sexual on this planet. There are many ways. And we're beginning to understand and accept that. And I think that's an important breakthrough in our understanding of what human nature is. There is no one woman nature or female nature, but there are some interesting facts about the universality of certain behaviors of men and women all across the planet, no matter what their cultural setting. But I would never say that all women are exactly alike and have a nature that they must follow. I don't think there's a capitalist nature. I think what we have is that capitalists understood what we are, and particularly at the time that capitalism arose. And they have played it well. They've gotten power out of it. They've understood us. They've understood what we want. We like cheap food. We like lots of stuff to drink. We like babies. We like to make them secure and happy. And capitalism is played in its advertising and production all the way there. But I think that it's also possible for people to say, in looking at all this, say, I don't want those things. And I think that the very fact that people, men and women, have decided that we've got enough babies. We aren't going to be forced into having 6 kids as we were in an agrarian society. Or whatever it will be. I mean, whatever that number would be. That people are saying to themselves, I don't want children. It's okay to do that. That's not something that's been created by capitalism or anything else, but it's come along in recent years because I think we've grown quite full of stuff. And we realize that we live on a planet that is not going to produce enough stuff to keep up with our gonads, our sexual appetites and organs. This planet cannot go on, as people were saying a few years ago, infinitely in 16 billion, 32 billion, 64 billion people. We'll all be standing at a New York cocktail party, like this, side by side, unable to move if we have that number of people. We can't keep expanding in terms of our appetites for food until we've already basically put every acre of land that had any arable value in it, and many acres beyond that, into production just to keep ourselves fed, just to keep the food on the table. So where are we going to go for more agricultural? The only possibility that I can see is that we start basically restricting, changing our desires. But I don't want it to come from some church or political leader who says we must. I think it's better to left to the people themselves. I think they have the wisdom and the capacity and the flexibility of their nature to make those decisions. And they've been doing so all along quite well. So I'm not sure whether I've answered your question or not, but I'm not going to get into this question about the techno-feudalism. I don't know anything about that particular idea. But I think I'm asking people to say, basically, if you want to have faith in this world, don't have faith in your leaders, ideologies, or philosophies, absolute faith. Have faith in yourself. Think for yourself. I'm an Emersonian. Emerson, my heroes, in some ways. And as Thoreau says at the end of Walden, how does he put it? That he grew in confidence that people could, if they pursued their dreams and their instincts in some sense, could lead a life that they had never imagined before. There's an openness and possibility in us as there is in all of nature. And I would say self-reliance is part of that. Think for yourself. And I think there's nothing more Emersonian than that phrase. So I've got to stop there. My throat is hurting too much for me to go on. But is there some other question?
Thank you, Don, and thank you all the audience and no questions. Actually, I'm a conservationist. Yeah, maybe very different from the fields of the people present. And I work with NGO on biodiversity conservation and nature protection. The reason why I'm come here because I work very closely with a professor of biodiversity conservation in Peking University, and she introduced this lecture. So, and I'm really interested in just learning your book and listening to your talk today, because I actually work as an interface of people and nature, because we are trying to figure out what the problem the environment, the biodiversity is facing every day, and what people are, how people are harming it, how people are protecting it, but why it is so weak. Actually, I have just three very small points to share with you. Every time if we want to convince companies or governments to protect biodiversity, we will say that human has already using too much resources on the earth, and we have already crossed 4 of the 9 planetary boundaries of the earth. That means if we cross all of them, we will all die. No one, even the richest one, will die. And the second small point is we actually believe in people who want to do good. And we work with investors. The investors are doing a lot of investments into the businesses which harm nature a lot. And a lot of them don't care about nature. They just want to take more resources as possible and make money. But a lot of them are now aware of just making some changes. And every time we talk with them, how can we influence more investors to do good to nature? They will say, the big gap is we need to qualify biodiversity. We need to qualify nature. And that is a very difficult question that no one can answer. Even, I think, the most powerful government officer cannot answer. The powerful scientists cannot answer. So I'm always thinking about maybe there is no answer to this question. This question is not the question that we need to answer. Maybe we need to find another way. And the third small point is actually we are working on the relationship of renewable energy development and biodiversity conservation. Maybe not everyone here knows that the new renewable energy, yes, they are green, but only green in when they are operating. They are doing low carbon. Yes, in that perspective, they are green. But actually, a lot of them are occupying a big amount of land and sea and ocean. That will make a lot of impacts to the biodiversity, the species, killing species, and affecting their habitats. And even if you just search for the whole life cycle of renewable energy, the mining. Okay. That's the third. I'm just want to let everyone knows that the renewable energy is green, but it's also a question that it's still an infrastructure. And people, if we need more and more energy, if we just develop AI or all the technique, we need more and more energy. We will not stop just using up the resources on the earth. So all of the three points. I just want two small questions, maybe not about this field, but
short, because my memory's short.
yeah. The first question is, I'm really interested in maybe there need to be more dialogues across these two fields, nature and social science. And maybe I just want to know, are there more how many more scientists as you are paying attention on natural history, and so that we can talk with and we can work together to make the profound change. The second question is, have you thought about the pathway to make the change? Because there is another point is if some individuals make the change first, there will be unfairness. I mean, just people give up giving birth to baby. People just stop themselves just using a lot of resources. But a lot of people are giving birth to. Okay, so have you? I think this is a difficult question to answer. But is it possible? Is it necessary that we bring back some Chinese traditional knowledge, thinking, or any other just indigenous people's traditional knowledge? Yeah, so that we can together think about how to draw the pathway. Thank you very much.
Well, I don't know where I can start here. Your questions are big and broad and difficult to answer quickly here. I said the other day, I think I said, I'm an environmentalist. I've been trying to promote an environmental history agenda, which is environmental. But I am writing against the environmentalists also. Book. It's not just professors of history or people in the humanities or capitalists. I'm writing also against a lot of environmentalists because I think they have a very simplistic understanding of the planet. The boundaries guys will admit that those categories they've set up, those boundaries, are partly political. They're not all just purely biological or scientific. But, and I think, we need a lot more realism in the world about the planet and about the limits that we face. That's what I'm very much in favor of, and that's why I think the scientific community is very valuable. But when I hear environmentalists much of the time, I think here are people who say they love nature and want to protect it, but they don't love human nature. That's bad. Well, why is it bad? How can one be good and one bad? How did that happen on a planet? If some God designed it that way, well, to hell with that God. That's not nice to design a good and a bad nature. So I said, let's get beyond all that good and evil part. I think humans are good. I trust them. I trust them as much as I trust pelicans or whales or birds and so on. I think they have perhaps more capacity for moral judgment than some of those do, or moral impulses and so on. But anyway, I want an environmentalism that is not so pessimistic about people, and that needs professors and scientists to tell us exactly what to do, et cetera, et cetera. That's my ultimate message. So I think I'm hitting people on all sides, and I'm making myself a target for people on all sides of the world. But believe me, I think environmentalism has led me to be too pessimistic about people. It's led me to be kind of arrogant at times toward my fellow human beings. It's led me to be unrealistic about the capacity of life to absorb things. That's why. So I want to see a better environmentalism too out of this world.
We are.
Okay, I hope so. Maybe historians and the humanists are all doing better too. But Somebody else have a question here? You want this guy over here and wanting to ask something. Thank you.
Let's take it as a final question.
It's up to you. You're the boss. I'm
Thank Professor's thought.
Yeah, I do have a bad thought.
Thank you, Professor Worcester, for your lecture. And I was wondering, how would you evaluate the rat experiment by John B. Conhor in 1960s?
I have no idea who you're talking about.
He did an experiment using rats. He built
Independence.
Built a small society.
Rats behaved under dense population.
Yep. And how would you evaluate it?
I think that's a very important bit of research. I think it explains how people behave too. When people came from Europe to the New World and got little farms in New England and so on, they had many more children than they had before. The environment was much more open. There was far less agriculture going on. There was agriculture. There were people living there, but so they felt freer to have more children. But when things got more compact and dense, people began to decline. And I think this happened pretty clearly in the United States by the 19th century and in every other country. The fertility rate goes down, down, down. The population continues to increase because we're taking care of all the old people and keeping them alive, people like me. Instead of everybody dying at age 30, we're making it into the 80s and 90s and so on. That has increased population dramatically. So if you want to deal with this problem, start shooting some of us old people. I mean, we're a big reason why the world is in a mess.
Some cultures did that.
What?
Some cultures did that. Primitive cultures.
Yeah, we don't want to go back to that. I know. Geronticide. I don't want to kill baby girls either. I don't want to kill anything. But I think we have to face the fact that the people are really running around now saying, if the population rate goes down in China or Japan or the United States or wherever, how will we pay for all these old people? They take money, and so on. And I have an answer for them, but they won't listen to me. But I think that's one of the basic reasons why people say they're worried today. They're not worried anymore about the fact that we're going to run out of resources for everybody. They're worried about how are we going to support all these old folks on health care, housing, etc. Well, there's an easy answer to that. You can import 1 million Indians a year from India. They'll do it for you. They'll solve your problem. They'll work in the factories. You can become a multicultural society just like the United States, or many other countries where you could allow immigration in. How many people have come from China to the United States to live? They've been a great contribution to our country. Don't get me wrong. But how many Americans are allowed to come to China to live, to settle, to become citizens? How many people from all those poor countries around you? So you could solve your old people's problem, your population problems, the dropping fertility rates very quickly and easily if you wanted to bring in. What are 1 million Indians compared to 1.4 billion Chinese? They're not going to have any significant impact. So now I'm getting really outrageous, right? Yeah, I do know that stuff on density dependence, which suggests that among many species, their nature changes, their fertility changes, their behavior changes according to the number of other rats around them. I think that was a very interesting line of research in the 50s and 60s, but we kind of dropped it.
Well, do you think that the world right now has get into the decline point in that experiment? We know that we have a population over 8 billion, and the contradictions between two genders have been more and more severe in recent years. Young women in East Asia are turning left, while the young men are turning more and more conservative. And we can see, especially in South Korea, the contradictions between two genders are become more and more severe, and people, young young middle class young men and women are not likely to have babies, or even they do not, or even they are not willing to have sex. The sociologists call that the depression of sex, call this phenomenon. Are we reaching the declining point just like the rats?
I don't think there's any danger of us running out of people. Not when we got 8 billion of us on the planet. And even if we don't reproduce, replace ourselves, and keep that number high, if it goes down, it's not going to go down forever and ever till we're extinct. I don't think the human beings are going to go extinct soon. I think we've been around for 200,000 years in our modern phase, and we probably got at least another 200,000 years. We'll go through so many transformations, but I think the one thing that can happen that would make this change faster would be women taking more power over their bodies, over society. I vote for women every time I'm given a ballot. Most men in the United States, though, voted for Donald Trump, just as there's a gender gap in the United States in voting. Unfortunately, enough women didn't go to Kamala. They went to Trump, some of them. But the majority of women voted for Kamala Harris. So there's a big gender gap in the United States, which is going to that is in some ways the essence of this last election. Who won? Which gender? And it was posed perfectly. 2 immigrants on one coast, New York versus Berkeley, coming together. It was a massive contest. We're going to see a lot more of those kind of contests in the future. I hope the women win. I think the world will be better managed and better off if the women win. And I think they'll be able to sort out this population issue a lot better than men have done. Men just love to see little children lining up behind them, like cabbages. They're kind of like farmers. You produce all these cabbages, and you go in and say, I've seen so many photos of farm men standing there proud like a patriarch, and all their little cabbages lined up next to them, Women don't find that, I think, quite so empowering or whatever. But men are changing too. I've said enough.
Well, thank you, Professor.
So let's stop here. Okay. For those who are interested in the scholarship, there's still a chance. What's the next lecture? Right here?
Yeah, it's going to be here on Friday.
Okay. Come again.
3 o'clock.
At 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay. Let's give our sincere thanks to the professor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks goes to Professor Lu Yang.
I
Thank
can't.
you.